Hello, folks, and welcome back to Chris Wyatt Reports on the Adopt Africa channel. This is Chris live in central Pennsylvania. My guest today, I always have to be careful, make sure I get this correct, but yours is not that hard. It's pretty phonetic. It's Notukela Makohliso.
Yep.
Makohliso. Did I get it correct?
Makohliso.
Okay.
Makohliso, you just have to press the tongue on the Makohliso part. But you did really well.
All right, but you go by Notu, I think, for short. Is that correct?
Notu, Tuxi, Tux, all very welcome.
But we can't call you late for dinner. No.
No, definitely not. I don't even accept calls at that time.
Welcome to the program. It's a pleasure to have you on. I was asked if I'd be willing to interview you, and as I said, I'm willing to interview any candidates who aren't avowed racists, and so here we are. I'm happy to have you on. I interviewed Athol Trollope, the Eastern Cape chairman for ActionSA yesterday, so I'm looking forward to this. I mentioned it, and obviously he knows who you are. He said you're a lovely person, and looking forward to it here. Before we get going, though, Erica just gave us 70 Rand super chat. Thank you for that, Erica. And folks, thanks for tuning in. Let's go and get started. So, Notu, where are you from in South Africa?
I am based in Cape Town in the Western Cape. Originally, I was born in the Eastern Cape, where Ethel is now the premier candidate. What an act to follow. I absolutely love him, completely adore him. I must teach you a few Nguni words so that you can impress him when you go and visit.
Okay.
But I'm based in the Western Cape in Cape Town. I am running for public office. I have been in the civil society sector for almost the past 10 years, working extensively with persons with disabilities. I acquired a disability not too long ago, and that caused me to pivot in life and do things that really matter in my life and really meaningful and fulfilling work.
Well, that's, I think, something we'll probably talk a bit about is the working with people with disabilities. You mentioned you recently acquired a challenge in life with disability. I didn't realize it was a recent development. That must be especially challenging for you when you've gone through life to this stage and not had to deal with that. And then suddenly you're confronted by a life-changing event or situation. I mean, look, I don't mean to pry personally. I suspect that you don't mind sharing because I believe that's, if I'm wrong, you can correct me, that's part of who you are and you don't mind talking about it. But this must have been quite a shock to your world and really refocused you on what's important in life.
It completely turned my life upside down. I was in academia. I was a lecturer at one of the universities here in the Western Cape. And I was in business. So that Christmas Eve, I had just closed business a bit early because it is a public holiday. And I didn't make it home. A drunk driver drove into my car. That was in 2017. Fast forward to now. I am a passionate social justice advocate. I think apart from my children, that is my biggest why in fighting the many injustices that persons with disabilities and all other vulnerable and minority groups face in society.
So, Notu, were you aware of the challenges that face people with disabilities before this unfortunate situation, which a drunk ran into your car, or it's you just didn't notice it before? Most of us don't see it in front of us unless in America, of course, we have legislation that requires accommodation for people with disabilities. That kind of brings it to the forefront a bit more. But having lived much of my life in Africa, it's not something that is normally put in your face. It's just you see people with disabilities and people, unless they're family or you work with them, you tend to just, they're like other people. They blend into the background. You don't really notice it. It sounds to me like it's something that you weren't even really paying much attention to. And then, wham, you're confronted with it in a personal situation.
you, in a way, I thought I was woke. I thought I knew. I mean, I'm an educator, and I'm always looking out for persons who need assistance. But acquiring a disability and living that life just brings it to life in a completely different way. I joke about all my favorite places to eat. I realized after I acquired a disability, all my favorite places were upstairs. So suddenly I couldn't reach any of them. Small things like that, they don't really register because it's not our lived everyday reality. People who used to speak to you start to talk at you. I now have a full-time carer, and people will address her regarding me, and I'm right here in front of them.
Look, I'm making the face because as a linguist, I speak 6 languages. I learned very early on that even though the person talking back to you is not the person communicating something, that's whom you're communicating with. So you look at the person and the other person is just there. They're just a device. I mean, I'm not trying to dismiss the humanity of the person, but an interpreter or a caregiver who's responding for you is just a device. It's polite to look at them occasionally, but your conversation is with that person. And as an interpreter, if you're good at being an interpreter, you get that intuitively because no one should be looking at you. You know, I've had that happen. I'm in Africa. I've been interpreting and translating, from French to English, and the person's looking at me, and I'm kind of like, you're talking to this guy, not me. I understand where you're coming from in that. That has to be very frustrating because it's probably subconscious and not intentional. It's just a natural reaction for a human being, but it is kind of rude, even though it's not intentional.
It is extremely rude. I recently had a talk at my stroke support group, which Erica is part of, and they asked me, when do I remember my first advocacy moment where I was standing up for myself? And I remember specifically going to the traffic department trying to get my driver's license now with my strong left hand and strong left foot. And the gentleman there, even though I greeted him in several languages, completely ignored me and spoke to my carer. By the end of it all, I was like, call your manager. Long and the short of it, the gentleman was dismissed. He was called to a disciplinary committee, and he chose to resign because he just had too much skeletons in his closet. But it forces you to stand up for yourself, especially when you've had a different lived reality and all of a sudden you are thrown into this different world altogether. So disability for me demanded of me to take action, to speak even for those who are the voiceless, who cannot speak for themselves.
Well, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time unless you want to talk about, because I want to talk about your candidacy. We'll get to that in a moment, but I do want to say one more thing. I suspect as someone who is a teacher, someone who is engaged, that you are articulate in your communication skills, and it sounds like that the accident and or stroke that you may have had have made challenges in your speaking skills. Has that been a frustration for you? Obviously, I suspect that you today sound very differently than you did a few years ago.
Big time, big time, because apart from my physical disability, my speech is impaired. So now my speech is much slower, and it takes me a bit longer to process things. So there's a million thoughts going on in my head, and less of them come out. So that for me took some getting used to. For a while, I went into a deep depression of not wanting to see people, of isolating myself. But you know what? That was part of my recovery. I know I now just use what I have and I just roll with it, because I'm fortunate to have what I do have. I'm fortunate to have my wheelchair to move around. There was a time when I couldn't even get out of bed. I didn't have that. Or couldn't get onto a wheelchair. So I live in the state of gratitude, and all the limitations remind me that, you know what, it can always get worse. So I'm grateful.
Well, I love the outlook. Yeah, I tell you that, of course, I speak at 1,000 miles an hour, although I'm speaking much slower pace today, not because of you, but for my audience, because they know I get carried away sometimes. But I can only imagine, for me, the two things I've worried about as I age are, number one, at some point, if you develop some sort of thing like dementia or Alzheimer's in old age, that worries me because my brain and my ability to communicate are the two things that have always really been strong for me. And then, you know, like you, my brain's going 1,000 miles an hour. I can think of more things simultaneously than I can actually communicate with my voice, even though I speak fast. So that would be frustrating for me. I mean, if that does happen to me, I guess the only thing I'll have to rely on is the fact that I remain dead sexy. So, I mean, suppose that would be helpful for me.
It's a huge advantage.
Yeah. I'll just have to sit back and look, you know. Yeah. But seriously, okay. So listen, it's very inspirational what you said, and I can imagine the despair. But I like the outlook because you have life, you're alive, you have family, and you have. It sounds like a calling now. I want to ask you though. Look, I mean, you know, you could toss the dice and pick one of 300 different political parties in South Africa, the ANC, the DA, the Freedom Front Plus, ACDP, UDM, the list goes on and on and on. But you have gravitated to Herman Mashaba's ActionSA. Now, I've interviewed Herman, and I find him a fascinating fellow. So tell me, why ActionSA? How did you wind up with that standard? By the way, the green colors are pretty cool. It used to be my favorite color, but now I'm into purple.
Green is amazing. Okay, it looks good on everybody. I love this question because I was a student activist and we were part of the cohort at the University of Stellenbosch that started the ANC Youth League, the SASCO, and so on. So I was really raised by the ANC into political awareness and education. I'm no longer a card-carrying member because of what the ANC has become today. It is not the same ANC of Mandela, same ANC that our parents fought for to gain the freedom that South Africa enjoys today. So ActionSA, when I started during COVID, I remember reaching out to the lady who was then the provincial chairperson of the Western Cape to find out what they were doing for persons with disabilities. Fast forward, it is currently the only political party that doesn't only preach diversity, they walk the talk. They have a disability forum, a women's forum, a youth forum, as well as for veterans. None of the many political parties that are running for these elections understand the urgency of these groups to be able to run themselves, to be able to lead, and to realize their own urgency. Persons with disabilities don't want to just sit on the sidelines and watch life pass them by. We have many things that are barriers, and we need to fight to remove them so that we can also enjoy the rights that disability should enjoy and enjoy life in all of its pleasures, not always have to fight. And the other thing that was very important for me is my faith. I am who I am because of my faith. And ActionSA is run by a God-fearing man I believe that when you look at people, you can judge them by their character. And Herman Mashaba's character is really above most men. I really look up to the person that he is as a human being, and he is a God-fearing man. With all of those things, I can also add that the values of ActionSA really impress me. Values like family, ethical leadership. Corruption is our number one enemy because that has robbed the people, the poor people in South Africa, of their future that they should have gotten because our government is so corrupt. So I can go on and on and on about why ActionSA is my political home. Lastly, the fact that Mashaba is an unapologetic capitalist. I myself am a single mom, but I'm really okay because I have, despite my disabilities, I found ways to run my own businesses and to sustain my family and my ecosystem. And over and above that, run my own foundation, which is 100% self-funded. So shortly, I can go on. Really, I can go on. ActionSA is a political home for me because it just resonates with me on so many levels.
Well, I think that's a fair way to describe how you gravitated to them. Some of the things you mentioned, you find some of those elements in other parties. The Freedom Front Plus has a focus on family and faith and the free markets. ACDP has a very strong focus on faith, but almost exclusively Christianity. That's been their big focus. But I got to tell you, the one thing I find fascinating about ActionSA is I too am an unashamed. I don't apologize for being a capitalist. Capitalism has lifted more people out of poverty than any system in the history of humankind. When capitalism is allowed to flourish rather than be hampered by governments, people benefit at all levels, all strata, and none of this class warfare nonsense exists. The problem with capitalism is that people misportray it, misdescribe it, and lie about it all the time. The reason Black South Africans are poor is not because of capitalism. It's because of the wrong-headed macroeconomic policies of the ANC. And while I'm on that subject, you mentioned that you were at Stellenbosch and students and got involved in the youth league and all those things. I've been arguing since 2019 that the ANC has betrayed the liberation struggle, that they have absolutely betrayed it in every way possible. I gave them as much rope and as much time and as much patience as I could stomach. But by 2019, it was pretty clear that this was a party being run by a cabal of thieves who are kleptocracy, who don't care about South Africans. We just saw it again this week, Noto, a 3-year-old child dying in a pit latrine in the Eastern Cape. The callous disregard for life, particularly for Black lives in South Africa by the ANC, when the money that they stole in PPE theft alone would have built every single one of those 400 schools that don't have an abolition unit with an abolition unit, probably a gymnasium too. That was all just during lockdown. And we're talking about schools that many of them were built since 1994 and never given proper sanitation. It's got to be heartbreaking, but you come from the Eastern Cape, and so you know what I'm speaking of. You've seen it up close and personal, just how bad things can be. And the Eastern Cape is one of the most loyal parts of South Africa to the ANC, and it's also one of the most poor.
Sadly so. Sadly so. I cannot imagine why it feels to me like it's hate, it's self-hate, The Eastern Cape ranks so low on so many things. You mentioned the story of the child who just recently passed on. One of the rampant things in the Eastern Cape is poverty. Each year you will hear a story of a mom who kills not only herself but her children because they're hungry. And yet the Eastern Cape continues to vote for the ANC. I struggle to grasp my mind around it, why they keep voting for it. But I also understand that our country is still very wrinkled in trauma. And we just need to keep educating people and letting them know that there are alternatives. I mean, I am in ActionSA, and I've been appointed now as the incoming social development shadow minister for Parliament. I will not let my people starve. I've worked with no income to help people, and we need people who are in office for the right reasons to sort of win back the trust of the South African population, because they are still very traumatized, not only from what happened during oppression, but also the fact that after 30 years of democracy, the Black people are still living under the poverty line.
And
yet
three times as many of them live under poverty than did under the National Party. That ought to be a disgrace to the ANC. I mean, the ANC has managed to get 30 million Black South Africans into poverty, vice 8 or 9 million. That's just sad.
And what they're good at is lining up their own pockets.
Yeah, they definitely line their pockets.
And that's why I'm no longer a card-carrying member of the ANC. I really hope that we can get them out of office and teach them a lesson. It's not about their pockets, it's about the people of South Africa. And that is what we are doing. That's why people like myself and Mr. Mashama and why people like Ethel could not stay away from politics, even though he would like to retire, because
yes, every time I talk to Ethel, he always mentions that he wants to retire from politics, and he did retire. But it's like that what is it, Goodfellas, or one of those, you know, those movies, the gangster movies. Just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in. Yeah. So he's trying to get away, but he's still in politics.
He answered the call because he's an awesome leader. Our people still need him.
Well, he definitely is interesting. I'll tell you, I was fascinated when he was the mayor of Nelson Mandela Bay. I followed the progress there and also the efforts by the ANC to undermine that administration. And he held on despite constant, no confidence vote efforts to try to get him out. And not for any other reason that he was two things. Number one, and they said it openly, because he's white. Boy, talk about racist. They want him out because he was white. And number two, because he wasn't the ANC. So shame on those people. But let me ask you this question. Which list are you on? Are you on, because it's a very confusing election for people, even South Africans. You got to go to vote and you get 3 ballots. You get to vote 3 times, but you only put 1 X on each ballot. There's a national ballot, a regional ballot, and then I guess the provincial ballot. So which of those are you appealing on, so that if we see how many votes ActionSA gets, we know we'll see you in office?
I am in the national list, which is the list going to Parliament. I'm number 24 on that list. So I understand that our system is that if 10 million people vote, you need about 25,000 million votes to get 1 seat. So last national elections, about 17 million people voted. So it would have been about 30 million votes for 1 seat in Parliament. Those numbers go up incrementally depending on how many people vote. But I am on the national list to go into Parliament as part of the shadow cabinet for ActionSA.
Sorry, I distracted here. My phone was trying to get my attention. Yeah. So you were on the national list. Well, 24. Okay. Well, we'll keep our eyes on that and see how well ActionSA does. Hey, folks, if you're just tuning in, I'm speaking to ActionSA candidate for Parliament, as we've just disclosed, and that is none other than Notukela Makohliso.
Yes.
Is that better?
Makohliso much better.
Well, well, I'm familiar with the Khoi and the San, especially the San people, as they call them, Basara in Botswana, where I used to live. I don't have the clicksome vocabulary, so I have to do the best I can. Between that and then trying to
With me.
and we'll get it covered. But between that and the G's and Afrikaans, get me started on that. The G's and Afrikaans are rough.
You are doing very well with Afrikaans, by the way. I'm quite impressed.
Well, thank you very kindly. I appreciate that. So listen, Notu, let me just run through the challenges in life here. They shouldn't be challenges, but these are challenges. You're a woman. You're a single mom. You're Black. You have acquired a disability. Yet you have such a wonderful outlook on the world, and it appears like you're being successful in spite of all the challenges that you're facing. How do people react to you, other than the people that when your caregiver's there are talking to the caregiver? But I mean, when you're out campaigning and meeting people, do you resonate with people? I mean, I should think that if I met you, you'd resonate with me. I'd be like, wow, very impressive young lady.
The part of me that is an activist is not as strong as the part of me that is a teacher. So a lot of people, when they encounter my story or they come to know me, they think, oh, it's so inspirational. It's not our job as persons with disabilities to inspire non-disabled people. It's not. But what I will do is teach you a couple of things. And that's how I look at it. But I make sure, because when your body presents differently, people will look at you and people will talk. And I have really pretty wills. My wheelchair, I think, is a conversation starter. People will always say, oh, you look so pretty. Where did you get that from? And then I got them. And then I will ask them, okay, where are you from, whatever. This is what I survived. And by God's grace, I've survived it. Do you know God? Who are you voting for? Are you registered to vote? Your vote counts. But that's my new reality. That's we just have to get people talking, and because when we engage people, people learn.
Well, listen, Noto, I agree with you, and I think it's very smart of you to take things and use them as a conversation starter. You know, I recently ran for office, and unfortunately, I did win. I was beaten badly, but there were 5 candidates in the race. That was part of the reason why I didn't do as well as I'd hoped. But on my palm cards, the palm cards that we take out and we hand to people. So as a conversation starter, I showed people, I said, so this is me. Okay, well, I got to hear. I'm on a green screen, so that's me. But that's 4 years ago, and this is me today. And because people can't believe that that's the same person, I said, "Well, that's me today." I said, "But this is me before Joe Biden. This is me after 3 years of Joe Biden." So you see, conversation starters. So I know what you're talking about there, and nobody, even people that like Joe Biden, failed to laugh. Even the people, they weren't insulted by that. They thought it was funny, because we've all dealing with the insane inflation that's been going on the past 3 years, and the value of our dollar and rand just being cratered away, just being chipped away like viral particles from COVID sloughing off. It's terrible. So you mentioned business. Can I inquire as to what sort of business you did? You mentioned you're a businesswoman as well.
Yes. I am, in fact, an award winner.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm glad I asked then.
I'm a serial entrepreneur. I'm always looking for a solution that I can provide. When everyone was shutting down offices and going back home during COVID, I acquired a laundry in the CBD of Cape Town. People thought I was mad. It was an ailing business. And I have now been running that business for the past 3 years. We are still standing. We're still trading. And for me, apart from the research consultation that I do, apart from my foundation that I'm running, it's important for me to be able to generate my own income and have a financial safety net. Because a lot of the time when you go into public office, we need to understand it is not a career move. In fact, compared to the private sector, you will get a pay cut. That's why in South Africa, a lot of our government officials will always take bribes and brown envelopes. But if I have a safety net, if like Kevin Mashaba, I am running a successful business, I am okay. I do not have a price. I can stand as an ethical leader that sticks to my values and what I have told South Africa I will do when I get into office. So it's all been building up to where I am now, that I run my businesses successfully, not only for now being in public office, but also for my kids to see that if their mom can do it, so can they.
Setting a positive example for your kids. That's excellent. I mean, in so many ways, I'm sure you do that. I mean, it's a challenge for single parents. It really is, and it's great to see single parents succeed, especially success raising kids properly, and great to hear about the business prospects there. You know, when I was doing the petition signing period, because like South Africa, we have to have signatures to appear on a ballot. Fortunately for my office, for the state legislature, I needed just 300 signatures. I did get many more than that, but I needed 300. But they have to be people in my party because it was a primary, not the general election, and registered voters. So you very, very limited number of people. But when I was running around, one of the gentlemen said, "Would you take a pay cut?" And I said, "You mean if I'm elected to the legislature?" And he goes, "Yeah." I said, "Well, of course. I'm not running for office for the paycheck. I mean, I'm running because the country's about to collapse. I spent my entire life defending the Constitution and protecting people and their liberties, and I see them being circumvented by the state and federal government, and I'm just trying to make a difference here." And yeah, so pay cut? Yeah, I'd take a pay cut. Yeah, I had no problem with that. Sounds like you probably wouldn't mind either. But yeah, it seems like a lot of people go into office here, there, everywhere, not for being a servant leader, to serve the people, to meet their needs, to address and to lead them, but for self-aggrandizement, for self-enrichment, or craven political power. I mean, that's very disturbing. But I mean, it's the norm in so many places, right here in Pennsylvania and right there in South Africa. So it's refreshing to see candidates who are not offering themselves up for that reason. Well, let me ask you this, Notu. Has there been any negative blowback? Have you gotten anything negative? Because, I mean, you always get some people who, I mean, I'd be like, "Are you voting for Trump?" And they shut the door in my face, or, I didn't even say anything about Trump. You're shutting the door in my face. But have you run into any negative comments? I did see on your TikTok, one guy's like, "The ANC will win and win forever." And I loved your response. You're like, okay. But I mean, there's always some negative people. Have you seen any of that? And the reason I ask is because, do you get it because you're a woman? Do you get it because you're not ANC? Do you get it because you have a disability? I mean, if you've seen any negative aspects.
I can answer that in two ways. I said earlier on, the best way to judge a man is by their character. So when people want to say to me, "Oh, we hear this all the time, politicians," I quickly bring them to know what I have been doing in the past 8 years or so, and my reputation precedes me. So this is why ActionSA is such an awesome political home for me, because I have leaders like Mashaba who challenge all the other big political parties, their leaders, to have a lifestyle audit. Because if you follow the money, you will know if someone lives a clean life or not. So that's the first way that I am able to deal with the negativity, is just to bring people to know exactly what I have been doing prior to running for public office. Second part is that there are people that we will win over, and there are people that we will not win over. So as that response people who are diehard ANC members. Cool, it is a democracy, vote for who you want to vote for. There are people who are more open-minded to engage. Those people are willing to spend a bit more time investing, educating, and that type of thing. But there'll always be negativity.
Well, I think that's a very healthy approach. There'll always be negativity. My outlook on this was just chagrin. I was like, okay, like the lady, I knocked on her door and she said, are you campaigning for Trump? I said, ma'am, I'm not campaigning for anybody. It's the petition period. I have to get signatures so I can appear on the ballot in the primary. You're listed as a registered Republican according to public records. I'm a Republican. I'd like to run in the race. Can I get your signature on my petition? Well, can I ask you a personal question? Yes, ma'am. You can ask me a personal question. Who are you going to vote for? I said, do you mean in November? She goes, yeah. I said, well, given the options, Donald Trump and Joe Biden, there isn't really much of a choice, but I can't possibly see myself voting for Joe Biden. Oh, I'll vote for Biden. And she slammed the door in my face. Now, she had one of those Ring doorbells. That's where the camera is. And they have microphones and they can pick up what you're saying, even walking out on the street. So I know to keep my mouth shut and not say what I really wanted to say about that. But I like your approach. You're always going to have negative people. Look, as a leader, you can't please everyone. You could be here when Christ comes back for the resurrection and invite everybody to his return, and you'd still have detractors who don't like you. It's just the nature of life. There's always going to be someone out there. So that's why I asked the question. Before we talk more about ActionSA's prospects in Western Cape, which I think you're probably well positioned to comment on, Erica said something earlier in the chat. She said something about you tell folks, I think this is in your group, that people with disabilities have a superpower. I'd like to hear about that. What's the superpower?
My journey with my disability, for a long time, I couldn't even stand people calling me disabled because it's got a negative connotation. Disabled, anything, disenfranchised, that, discontinued. And I couldn't stand the thought of being discontinued. Okay. And so I talk about my journey of discovery. My disability, yes, it comes with many limitations, but really it has become a superpower. I adorn my wheelchair beautifully because it's a conversation starter. Instead of pulling people away, I can pull them closer and chat to them because I have a disability. I'm different. I'm okay being different. And my disability has empowered me to do something to change other people's lives, to meet people that I would have never thought I could meet ordinarily. So I also say that the accident turned my life upside down, but the comeback is always bigger with God. My disability is my superpower because my comeback is bigger.
Well, that's well stated. I understand why people feel that way, but like you said, not every dis word is something taken away. Discovery is learning new things. That starts with dis too. I've never looked at the term disabled as in a drug. I'm sorry, go ahead.
It took a while to get there.
Oh, it took you a while to get there. Yeah. Well, I can understand that. It's certainly a challenge. I mean, it's I can't imagine. That's the point I want to get to in a moment here. Is that it can all for every one of us change like that. We may be able-bodied today, but a stroke, or ask Erica, she had a stroke, or a car accident or an illness, and something can happen and your whole life gets turned upside down. But I personally have never looked at the term disabled as a derogatory term. That's why when people saw it as derogatory, I thought that was kind of offensive, because it's not to me. It's just descriptive, and I don't hold anything against people because of those circumstances. We're humans, we're frail. Just surviving a life is a challenge in and of itself. But it's as I said a moment ago, it can happen at any moment to anybody. You never know. You get infected with it.
One community that anyone can join. And even temporarily, there are people who gain a
recover,
temporary,
yeah,
and then recover.
Well, right. I think you
So
have a point there. I mean, like, I can't tomorrow be black. I won't be black tomorrow, but I can't be disabled. I can't become a woman, but I can become disabled. I mean, so, but, you know, the reason I mentioned the disabled thing is that, you know, when people start playing games with language, and that's what I think people do, you know, now we get pregnant people. I'm sorry, people can't be pregnant. Women can be pregnant, but not people. Women are pregnant. Women fall pregnant, not people. Anyway, so that's when people start playing games with the language. Now, speaking German, which has all these conjugations and all these different articles that change with each conjugation, each case. It's I sit there and, you know, German's hard enough to learn. You can't imagine if you try to twist it around like we're doing with English these days. But let me ask you this. So, what's your sense of things there on the ground in the Western Cape? Are you feeling it? Because the ANC is working overtime and sending Ramaphosa and others in the Western Cape in the hope that they can raise their total down there. There's no way they win a majority, but they think they can raise their total. And they're doing it mostly by appealing to colored Muslims, by claiming that they support the Palestinians when actually they're supporting Hamas. But so that's what the ANC is doing. MK is new. I don't know what they're doing on the ground in the Western Cape. The DA is doing the usual thing. There's a new referendum party that's trying to get some traction. So what about ActionSA? How do you guys feel about your prospects there? Because I expect you'll do well in Gauteng because, of course, Herman Mashaba was the mayor of Joburg, and there's residual goodwill. Plus, he's known as a figure, successful businessman, self-made during the apartheid era and post-apartheid under the ANC. So I think you'll do well in Gauteng, and also by-elections have shown that. I don't know how you'll do in KZN, but I think in the eThekwini Durban area, you'll probably do better than people expect. But what about the Western Cape? That's kind of one where we don't really have the bubble on. You're on the ground. What are your thoughts? How do you feel about it?
you know, this is our first national election contestation. And I almost want to say humble. But the reality is that people are sick and tired of the DA having run the Western Cape for about
15 years.
The past 15 years. Yep. And the poor have gotten poorer. And they really run the Western Cape well for the people who vote for the day, for the people who are well off. And the poor communities are really, really terrible. I don't know if you ever went into Khayelitsha, into the Cape Flats.
Yes, Khayelitsha, Mitchell's Plains, even further north, Dunoon. I've been to all those places. Yeah, in fact, I was in Mitchell's Plains when the taxi war was going on, and they were attacking Coca-Cola delivery trucks 2 blocks away from me. I didn't even know what was happening. But yes, I've been there. I've seen it up close and personal. It is not pretty.
And we sit with a situation where the colored voters in the Western Cape are about 42%, maybe 43%, and the black voters in the Western Cape are about 37%. And those are the areas where we are strong as ActionSA, because we are a very pro-poor government. Our policies are pro-poor and pro-social justice. So do I think we're going to do well? Absolutely. I think that we will surprise a lot of people in the upcoming elections in the Western Cape, because people underestimate us. And I think that we're going to be the underdog, and we'll surprise a lot of people come the 30th of May.
Well, I get the feeling that might be the case, and let's hope that is the case. My deal with South Africans is I ask them to go vote. That's number one. That's the most important thing. Please go vote, and there are enough people that are registered that can go vote, so please go do it. And number two, I urge people since 2020 not to vote ANC, EFF, or MK. Anything but those, for the most part. There are exceptions, but go vote. That's the key thing.
Yeah. I also always say, it doesn't matter if you do not vote for ActionSA, but go and vote, because your vote matters. And do yourself a favor and vote for change. A lot of people have a lot of things that have gone on. Unemployment is out of the world in South Africa. Poverty and. We cannot keep doing the same thing and expect different results. We have to vote for change. Hopefully the change will be ActionSA, because we believe only action will change South Africa.
Well, Mariana Nell in the chat says, Notukela, you've overcome so many challenges in your life. You're setting such a good example. Keep up the good work. God bless. Well, there you go. Some kind words coming in there. And Leovan said that she has a good friend who has been in a wheelchair for 30 years, and he tells me he's otherwise enabled, which has taught her lots. Yeah, no, I like that. That's pretty good.
By the way, Chris, yesterday when you were talking to Ethel, you mentioned that I am wheelchair bound. I'm not wheelchair bound. It's an assistant device. I get in and out of it. So we are wheelchair users. We're not bound to it.
All right. I sit corrected, as I'm seated, not standing. So I sit corrected. Okay. That's fair enough. Fair enough. But that's a phrase in our vernacular here in America. That's I was using American English. But yeah, that's a fair statement. Thank you for that. Wow. It's not often that people can correct me on air and are correct, but you are correct in this case. So I'll have to accept that one. But yeah, no, it's very nice compliments coming in here in the chat from folks who do appreciate that. So you go to Parliament. Parliament burned down, so you're going to have to go to the Cape Town City Hall building. Do you happen to know if it's access enabled for people with disabilities? I mean, I'm just curious. I've not been in that building, and that's where they're doing Parliament now with the limited seating. So I wonder how they'll handle that. If you'll be able to get in the chamber or not. Any thoughts? Do you even know if that's the case?
Oh, Chris, I'm losing you there.
Oh, okay.
You return to come in and out. You're breaking a little bit.
Okay.
Something about the center and accessibility. Please repeat the question.
Not a problem. I said that let's go with you get into Parliament. So you're in Parliament after the elections. The Parliament has burned down, as we know. The security was asleep or not present, and the Parliament burned down. So they've been doing the meetings in City Hall, the Cape Town City Hall. I don't know if that place is enabled for wheelchair access or for people with disabilities. Do you happen to know if that's the case? Because I know they've limited the number of people coming in there, and some people from political parties have to sit in other rooms and watch it on the screen. And I think we want your voice in the chamber, so you can raise points.
Well, I want to see. I've been to the Cape Town Hall before, but that was before I was on my Pretoria. Problem with accessibility in Africa, in South Africa, is not new. So if I get there and I'm unable to access it, something will be done. We need to demand for things to get done, Otherwise, nothing gets done. Yesterday, I went to do an oversight visit to SASA offices. SASA is the social development department that pays our social security grants. So I went to Anengalita to perform oversight. At the bottom on the ground area, they have the reception and the waiting area. All the service offices are upstairs. So persons with disabilities have absolutely no way to get upstairs. There's no elevator. So what do I do when I get into office? I need to make sure that there is an elevator in that place. I need to make sure that the bathrooms are working. I have a lot of work to do, but I'm the right woman for the job. If I get to the Cape Town City Hall and it's not acceptable, I need to be there because the Africans voted for me to get there.
Well, we've talked an awful lot about physical disabilities and about the challenges and things like that, but that's not all of who you are. you're a smart person and you've got ideas here. You're obviously, like Herman Mashaba, a capitalist, and like me. So your candidacy, I imagine, is about more than just a focus on people with disabilities and bringing that voice to them. It sounds like, and if I'm incorrect, you feel free to correct me. You've already got me once on this show. Feel free to correct me. But it sounds like your candidacy is about a lot more than just focusing on people with disabilities. You're worried about employment. You're worried about crime. You're also worried about some of the other issues. We haven't talked about infrastructure, but infrastructure in places like Khayelitsha and Mitchell's Plains is very suspect and unreliable. Are these all things that are issues you're going to focus on when you get into Parliament?
Absolutely. I mentioned my oversight yesterday in Khayelitsha. One of the things that are low-lying fruits that need to be actioned is security, because the elderly go there to get their grants, their persons with disabilities, and then what happens? That money is robbed. So they must have security. What I love about ActionSA is that apart from corruption being our number one enemy, we're quite emphatic about law and order. We have very clear policies about restoring law and order in South Africa so that persons with disabilities, women, the elderly, so that our communities are safer for everyone.
Well, one of the challenges, of course, in the Cape Flats, since we're talking about the Cape Flats, is the violence. Just the other day, another horrific story. An 8-year-old girl and her 1-year-old or 3-year-old brother were playing in the street there when gangsters running up and down the street in a shootout, and they shot multiple times into both children and killed these 2 children in a family. Absolutely horrific situation. The parents are both out working at the time, and they get a call, and it's the worst call you could ever get, that your child has been murdered by gangsters. As far as I know, none of the gangsters were hit by the bullets, but these 2 children lost their lives. Black children too. It's heartbreaking to see the brazen lawlessness that's taking place on the streets of South Africa. When I was there on my last visit, we had the taxi wars in Cape Town, and just by good fortune or maybe the grace of God looking out for me, I kept missing where the violence was. Now, there was some intentional planning to avoid it, and I made some smart moves, but you can't always account for that. I think that maybe I had a guiding hand from above might have been helping me, but it's just crazy. They murdered a doctor who made the wrong turn trying to get on the airport connection road there out by the Cape Town International Airport. And then I was due to fly out of there to, was I going to Gauteng or Tambo? I think I was going to Eastern Cape, I can't remember, but I was leaving out of there and a couple of days later. And so I called Avis to ask about returning my hire because it wasn't safe to go to the airport. And Avis said, you can drop it off downtown. I said, great. So how do you get me to the airport? And I said, well, that's your problem. Am I supposed to walk from downtown by the Victoria and Alfred waterfront, dragging my suitcase all the way out to Cape Town International Airport? The good news for me is that finally the SAPs and the Metro Police responded after that doctor was killed, the British doctor, and they started putting out police everywhere. And so when I drove down from Milnerton back that direction, every junction there was cops on every corner. And when I got to Airport Connector Road, there were like 60 police officers and armored vehicles out there. But I mean, people shouldn't have to live like that. It's pretty frightening, the brazenness of criminals in South Africa today. I mean, you think about it, you go to work, you're working hard to feed your family, you're living in a crappy place like Mitchell's Plains or Khayelitsha, and you get a phone call and someone murdered your children. And they weren't even the targets. So sad.
It's very disheartening, but this is how I look at it. A lot of the gang violence, a lot of the children who end up in prison, these issues are caused by socioeconomic issues that our current government is not dealing with. So if we are going to combat the criminology in South Africa, we cannot just say we will have more police visibility. It will not solve the problem. And the current day government is obsessed with having more police visibility. No. We need to help the poor people to get out of poverty. We need to restore dignity into people's lives. And that means we need an economy that is functional, that is producing jobs. We need to have an economy and we need policies that are going to support entrepreneurs. We need to feed our children from as early as at the ECD level, right until they graduate and they get a job. So that at no stage in their 23 years of learning do they end up in the streets begging, having to tend to crime and going to prison. Because that is the reality that we are faced with in South Africa, that people are poor, and because people are poor, they tend to crime for survival. So if our government can actually have an economy that is producing jobs, that is supporting businesses, people will have dignity and they will move out of the poverty line to actually be able to have lives that they can enjoy.
Well, I normally say a final word from my guest, but that was so eloquent and so well spoken. I'm almost afraid to say one more bite at the apple, but it's about time to wrap up. But so Notu, I will give you a chance for a final comment, and specifically about why should people go vote on May 29th, and why should they vote for ActionSA? So the floor is yours, a chance to share that with potential voters.
Thank you. ActionSA is the only party that not only believes in diversity, but it walks the talks. We are popular in the townships as well as in the suburbs, because in the heart of ActionSA are the people of South Africa, regardless of race and class. We're the only party that talks about how we are going to empower the disenfranchised in South Africa. The only community that talks about a universal basic income grant that will help people get out of poverty and restore dignity in people's lives. Education that is equal for all South Africans, regardless of their race. We have a situation with the current government where they spend about 400 rands a day on a prisoner and less than 27 rand for a child at ECDC learning. How are those kids supposed to be supported to be fed to a proper nutrition so that they can become the future of this country? It is time for us to vote for change. We cannot keep complaining about the current government and then keep voting for them. We must vote for change. And ActionSA promises to do just that. To take action to fix South Africa.
Wow, that's well stated there. It will take action to fix South Africa. I like that clever play on words. I'm sure that was part of the intent when they came up with the name for it. But Notukela Makohliso, thank you so much. Ke aleboa, bye-bye, donkey, for your time. It's a pleasure to meet you. If I get my passport back in time, I will be in South Africa for the elections, but I'm waiting for my bureaucracy to finish. It was 10 years. It had to be renewed. So hopefully I'll get it back. And I will be in the Western Cape. So hopefully if I get there, I get a chance to meet you. And if I talk to your caregiver and ignore you, grab me by the arm and say, hey, I'm over here.
I don't entertain it. I'm not the girl. Thank you so much for having me.
But I think you won't find me doing that, because that's my experience as an interpreter. I know that I'm talking to you. Now, you don't ignore the caregiver entirely. You got to address them. It's just rude otherwise. I mean, I think you can ask Erica. She had a caregiver in my visits, and I always made sure that the caregiver was included in things, because that's a person too. But the conversation's with you. All right, thank you so much, and I wish you the best of luck in this election. We're all going to be watching.
Thank you so much. Please come through when you are around. Let's have a fry. I would absolutely love to host you.
All right, excellent. All right, thank you so much. I'll let you drop off, and I'll wrap up the broadcast because I have a news broadcast right after this. Folks, for ActionSA, that's Notukela Makohliso, formerly from Eastern Cape, living in the Western Cape now, and a candidate for office for Parliament for ActionSA. There's a question or comment here by Mariana. If you're still there, very quickly, she said, we don't experience this in other political parties. Yeah, that's true, because people give up. But that's the problem with South African politics. South African parties really frustrate me. I'm not talking about ActionSA, but I'm talking about historically South African parties. People, when I first started doing these broadcasts 4 years ago, after I retired from active military service, I kept hearing it, well, black Africans will always vote for the ANC. I said, that's not true. That's a very simplistic explanation. And then in 2019, when 18% of black voters in Gauteng voted for the DA, I made that point. Well, no, that's an anomaly. It's not an anomaly. People are going to be frustrated. There's a reason why education has been dumbed down. It's so that people don't question things. But you have to, as a political party, get out and knock on doors, meet people. You can't simply campaign 90 days before an election and expect to win. The United Independent Movement under Neil de Beer launched their political campaign for this year in February of last year, over a year before the election. That's what all opposition parties should be doing. They should be campaigning all along to bring their standard out. And I've heard from people far too often, well, I can't go there. It's not safe because I'm not the right skin color. You know what? You recruit people who live in places like that, who share the same values and the same policy ideas, and they are part of your party and they recruit. That's what you do. That's what you do. The referendum party was talking about a gentleman who lives in Khayelitsha who's out there recruiting people in Khayelitsha for the referendum party. So you have to do that. Political parties are lazy. They think that a bunch of money will win elections. It can, but winning people to your standard and winning the loyalty of them for the right reason takes knocking on doors. During my campaign for election, although I didn't do particularly well, I did amazing considering I had no name recognition whatsoever. Almost nobody knew who I was. But during my campaign, I knocked on doors in trailer parks. I knocked on doors in low-income housing. I knocked on doors in million-dollar homes. I knocked on doors in middle-class neighborhoods. I didn't differentiate. I didn't discriminate. I went after every voter that I possibly could, because there are people in every social strata who share your values and views. And that's the bottom line here. So I don't hope she didn't leave there, Mariana, but that's my response on that. So, all right. Hey, Teresa, who's going to pay the basic income grant? That's a fair question, but every single political party says they're going to do that. So no one say they're getting rid of it. So it's going to be the few taxpayers or debt spending. So that's the bottom line. We're not going to solve that one in this election, that's for sure. Thanks for tuning in. You'll be redirected to the news program. I'll be back in just a couple minutes. We're 3 minutes late for the start of the news program. Thank you all for being here, and thank you to my guest, Notu. It was lovely speaking to you, and thank you for your time. See you guys here in just a couple minutes. Don't run off. We're going to do the news in just a few moments. Cheers, everybody. Thanks a lot for being here. Do appreciate it, and see you in a couple moments.